Hey, my name is Sasan. This is the Proteus Debate Academy. We are a equity project. That's it's all on here. This is what we are and who I am. Hope this video quality holds up the whole time. I know the last couple of videos I made, there were issues with that. I don't know. Fingers crossed. Seems pretty good so far. While you're reading this, in the last video that I put out, I think the last one, I talked about how to evaluate a debate case, right? How to give feedback on it, and I said that the reason I was thinking about that topic is because of this big work project that I have, and that is this thing that this video is about. I work for a nonprofit called the Brooklyn Debate League. More on that in a second. But I and my boss Joey have been working on a assessment tool for the skill level of debaters, and I'm gonna say way more about that in this video, as you can probably see from the little time thing. But what I'd like to say first is if you have not taken that evaluation, it's probably in the pinned comment under here, definitely in the description, I should hope. So do that first, whether you're a coach or whether you are a student or you're a former debater. That data is going to be really helpful for me. And once you've done that, or I don't know, if you can't be made to take that, I'm going to talk to you about what that thing is and why it's built that way. Welcome back. I presume it's 40 minutes later and you've taken this evaluation. Okay, so what do I mean by skill evaluation? Well, this tool isn't intended to tell you the difference between two really good debaters, right? It's not like a ranking system. I think the best way of determining how good a debater is to have some sort of competition, which we do all the time. And if you're looking for, I have this debater and I want to figure out, they know the basics, but I want to figure out what they should be working on next, you should be having them go to competitions, get ballots, and work based on those ballots. But there are needs that I'm about to talk about that are better met with a basic competency evaluation, which doesn't require anyone to know any debate jargon, applies across any debate format, and just looks at whether you have a basic fundamental ability to do this thing that we call debate. And I'll talk about why that is, but I would say, instead of thinking about this as like, okay, how do we evaluate the best basketball player? Think of it as more like what's called the NBA Draft Combine, which is, here's a series of skills that we assess for people who are hoping to get drafted into the NBA, and then we use that data to do something useful. But it's not the entire information that anybody's going on, and it's not built to be that. So why evaluate skill? First, this is where I'm going to talk about the Brooklyn Debate League, which has come up a couple times on the channel. I'm always hesitant to talk about it because they're my employer. Proteus Debate isn't affiliated directly with any other organization, and it's an equity project. So it's really important to me, it's really important to Paul, that we maintain a professional separation between like places we work, and especially when those places are trying to generate money, either by like selling student stuff or by like getting donations. And separating that from what we do here, because the whole purpose of this is to give free access to everybody, right? I would say that the Brooklyn Debate League isn't necessarily in conflict with that goal, but that's not why I'm bringing it up. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it gets increasingly blurry because my role at the Brooklyn Debate League is I'm the director of curriculum. I like decide what we teach and how we teach it. It's a very small organization. I have a lot of, you know, it's not like I'm just following someone's orders, right? It's collaborative, but my point is that it's a very blurry separation between like what I think debate should be like and how it should be taught, and something that I'm currently doing at the Brooklyn Debate League. So this is an area where I think I'll explain why we developed this, why we're developing this. It's not done. And I'd like your feedback on it, but it is a Brooklyn Debate League affiliated thing. There's your disclaimer. Okay, so why is evaluating skill useful? Well, practically speaking, there's a lot of stages of someone's debate career, or let's say pre-debate career, where it can be useful for placement. Like, I've worked for a lot of organizations that work with middle schoolers and younger, like 4th, 5th grade, and it can be really messy determining, like, okay, this person's never done, these two people have never done debate before. Should they be in the same class? Like, sometimes you want to build much more fundamental skills, and other times you're like, okay, let's like jump in and start learning how Congress debate works, right? There's also, like, you want to be able to measure like before and after, right? You want to be able to say, like, this curriculum produced this change, or you want to measure if it did that, right? So for me, like, that's the biggest thing. I write curriculum, and it's important for me to have some way of knowing if that curriculum is working. And when I'm working with really like competitive populations, like when I was coaching the college team, well, we go to competitions and we see how many trophies we win, and we'll know if it's working. But the work that we do at the Brooklyn Debate League is we help high schools, especially low-income high schools, in New York, start speech and debate programs. And while that they do compete, not every student competes, and the reason why the schools want speech and debate programs isn't so that like 4 kids can get a trophy. It's much more based on the portable skills. And so I want a way of measuring effectively, and I don't know that this is a completely effective way of doing that. That is why I'd like your feedback. The reason I'm making this is to have you take the evaluation, but the reason I'm making this video is to solicit your criticism of this attempt of getting this information to test my curriculum. But let's talk about that, right? So broadly speaking, there's a lot of like lip service paid in debate to like what all the benefits of debate are, but I don't really love the quality of that data. There's a lot of bias, obviously. There's a lot of self-reporting. We use a lot of meaningless metrics, and a lot of our accolades are just built to be vague and confusing. So for example, at the college level of debate, the community college championships for debate, Fire Up High, they don't have like first, second, and third place for some practical reasons. But another part of it is, instead, if you have gold, silver, and bronze, and you give multiple organizations, like for sweepstakes, or multiple students for an individual event, gold, silver, and bronze, then they all get to go home and tell their schools, like, hey, we got gold at this thing. And that can help that program build momentum and get more funding. Like, there's large, medium, and small school divisions at the national championships, but they're not called small, medium, and large. They're given like names like Wyman and Hindman, or I don't remember, like the Wheeler. And that's part of the reason for that, is so that you can go home and tell your organization, hey, we won the Wheeler division. And that can, I don't know, be vague enough that it can hopefully sound a little bit more exciting than like, hey, we got like second place at the small school division. And then we also have just all of these, like, here's how many people in Congress used to do debate, or, like the colleges love it. But like, is that stuff true? Like, do we know that colleges love it? Like, Paul and I had the idea of interviewing like an actual, like, I forget the term, but the people who work in like college admissions officer. And just ask them, like, how much of this stuff do you actually care about? Like, how much do you understand? Like, when you see debate, like, should people be listing specific tournaments they won? And so on. Now, there is some good data on this that I will put out, but the point is that I think we have to justify a lot in debate the value of what we do. And I don't find the data that we have access to currently satisfying, and that is why we're building this. But like, why does that matter? Well, the reason why the data being bad matters is because it's not enough to say that debate is good. Everybody knows debate is good. It's just that other things are also good, and other things don't cost as much, and other things don't take an entire weekend, and other things don't require you to travel and stay somewhere in person for a weekend, right? There's a lot of activities that have legitimate claim to we help students be better at school. Chess has that. Music has that. A million other extracurricular activities have that, which don't cost nearly as much. These are, I mean, I'm not exactly hiding what tournament this is from, but this is, let's say, a recent major national tournament. And if a public forum team wants to enter novice or middle school, that is $150. And if for whatever reason they don't have a judge they can provide, they owe another $175. And the average rate for a hotel room for this tournament that I could find, or at least the most popular one that people seem to choose, was $200 a night. And that's a lot of expense, especially for like a school that isn't bought in, right? Like, going to a principal of a school that doesn't have a lot of money and trying to tell them you should start a debate team, there's a lot of valid skepticism. And part of this is we need to work on improving stuff like this. And that's not a criticism necessarily of this tournament. It's the whole activity costs too much and takes too much time. I'm working on ways to fix that also. But let's talk about the cool data that exists now, because this is what I've included in some of our like pitch decks for trying to like get funding and donations. And if you're watching and you end up having to pitch speech and debate a lot, this data might be useful. So there is a study that I thought was pretty useful, pretty good, and it says that participation in competitive debate significantly raises graduation rates, ACT scores, and GPAs for students. I thought that was pretty neat. You can use this. Here's the one that I like better. This is a much more specific study. It's very recent. It's on data from 2012 to 2015, but the paper itself is from 2021. And they have specific metrics on how much, they have specific metrics on how much doing debate improved GPA and SAT scores. But not only that, but they controlled for like, well, smart kids do debate, and so they do better than the kids that don't do debate. There's data in there on how they did it, and then I took that, compared it to some publicly available information on average GPA. That was really hard to find, but 0.66 improvement in GPA is huge. So the national mean is 3.0. It's really hard to find like real data on that, so that's why I didn't include it. So, in theory, if you're going from like a 3.0 to a 3.66, you moved from like the 50th percentile to the top 10 percentile. Massive, right? Who knows if that's actually how it works, but that's compelling data. The other one that I have over on the right is SAT scores, which is much more publicly available. So New York City said, hey, here's our SAT scores in math and the other one that has a really long name compared to the national average. And then I looked at the amount of improvement in scores in those areas, and I just did some math, and New York City is 6% below the national average for SAT scores, but if they hypothetically got this average boost in scores that debate has been measured to have, that will put them 4% above. That's not like predicting the future, but this is pretty good data compared to like colleges like it. There's also this study, also pretty recent, that shows like gamifying education through competitive debate is a powerful motivator for students participating in academics and build self-confidence. That's also, pretty useful. So this stuff exists. It's not nearly as specific as I want it to be. There's the data that I'm trying to get would be better than this. So what is it that we're trying to measure? This is where the process had to begin. So Joey took what's a crack at this, and then I took a crack at it. I had Paul give me some feedback, and this is what we basically came up with. So this is called METAL. METAL is military talk for Mission Essential Task List. Mission Essential Task List. So the idea is that for the mission of improving, like, these are the tasks that you have to be able to do. It's split into a few different categories, and there's more. This is a screenshot of a spreadsheet that is much bigger than this, but let's talk about it. Broadly speaking, debate improves, and then here we're like, what are the things that debate improves, and what is it that like we want it to improve, and how would we break that down into little things that we could hopefully measure? So the first thing is listening. I think listening is the most important skill that debate trains. We break that down into specific areas, right? So identifying the main points and identifying where two people are agreeing and disagreeing, applying the value, like understanding the value framework someone's using for that belief. So like, why do they hold that belief? Warrants, like how are they justifying that belief? Correctly identifying that something is an impact. Being able to track, like, this did get responded to, this didn't get responded to. And that's kind of it for listening. And that is going to get incorporated in a few different ways in this evaluation. The next is speaking. So basic public speaking stuff like modulating your volume, tone, tempo, especially like appropriately for a specific text, and like being able to like identify and do that difference. Enunciating clearly, and then physical, like delivery stuff. And this was something that Paul really emphasized as a major problem in his public speaking classes that it teaches in college, like speaking to a person rather than reading at them, which is an important skill. We also have like clear structure. So this is kind of in the writing bit, but are your ideas like clearly separated and easy to follow? Not using filler words, strength of your vocabulary. This was a big one. So like, are you able to use language that conveys your message effectively? And then word economy, which is different than vocabulary, which is how concisely you're able to convey an idea. And in theory, all of these things are things that debate should be improving, or a curriculum for debate should be seeking to improve in the skills of a student. There's more. Here's the argumentation and critical thinking ones. So just at the basic level, understanding that and advocacy has multiple parts. Understanding that those parts should have a claim, a warrant, and an impact. You don't necessarily need to know those terms. Like, I don't care that you can pass on a piece of paper that an argument should have something called a claim and something called a warrant and something called an impact. I want to know that when you are writing an argument, you apply these things correctly. There's also just basic syllogism stuff, like an argument being sound. Like, if these premises are true, the conclusion is true, regardless of whether you think the premises are true or not, just being able to apply that logic. And also understanding that, yeah, the argument can be sound, but like not actually be true. And the basic understanding that differing sides can both be correct in their claims, right? And that the differences are based on how you're evaluating that thing. What else? Let's see. Being able to organize your thoughts and into like specific themes and like a contention or like an idea of a speech, and being able to weigh impacts, being able to engage in a values debate. And being able to adapt to your audience, like identify who your audience is and adapt to it. There's different ways that we're looking to do these things. We'll talk about it. Then there's research. We'll get way more into the research stuff. And finally, civics. This isn't really included in this current version of the medal assessment, but an education in forensics should teach you how the government works, and basic principles of law, and basic things about what the economy is and how that works. And we want to like measure whether we are doing that or not, so that we can correctly do it if we're not, and we can brag about it if we are. So let's talk about like how we measure those skills. So I'm going to go through the medal assessment as it is right now and explain to you like what a question is trying to accomplish and how it's accomplishing that. So we're going to start first with the impact comparison section. This section is a little clunky, and if anyone, like a student who's having this put in front of them, will probably not have all of these questions put in front of them. It's probably going to be a few, but we want to test all of the questions. The reason for that is, one, we don't want the test to be too long, but two, if we want to be able to give students the assessment again after a certain length of time. We're not sure how long. And we don't want people to be answering based on just recognizing a question, right? Even though we're not telling anyone like, oh, that's the correct answer. So in theory, it's not like they can just memorize that. But anyway, let's get started. The first thing that I want to look at is when you're doing impact comparisons, like, can you apply aspects of impact weighing, like weighing mechanisms, right? So here, I want to measure, okay, it doesn't matter which of these you think is more important broadly speaking. Can you identify that based on this specific metric of importance, one is winning over the other? So what affects the highest number of people? That's what we would call scope. And the U.S. economy crashing, the legal age being lowered to 14. The answer we're hoping for here, what we're looking for, is the U.S. economy crashing. There's a case to be made that driving age being changed doesn't only affect people who are 14 and 15, it also affects everybody on the road. But I would still argue that the U.S. economy crashing affects a higher number of people. Which of these would affect the higher number of people? Making college education free or curing Parkinson's? This is an example that I wrote that came out of the curriculum I used to teach impacts, because making college education free does affect a higher number of people. Or like forgiving student loans affects a higher number of people. Curing Parkinson's disease is probably a more significant impact on the lives of the people it does affect, right? And that's the distinction between scope and severity. Which of these would have a more negative effect? Now, this is a severity question on someone's life: losing a job, developing a major chronic illness. Hopefully, that I want to I want to know that these questions aren't like making like, I don't know, bad assumptions or anything like that. But what we're hoping for here is that you're identifying that a major chronic illness is more significant on, your ability to live, and also in terms of like time frame. This is another scope one. Which one more significantly affects the country overall? Price of gasoline, and military invasion. This is actually going into civics a little bit because it requires you to understand a little bit about war and international relations and like economy. The answer we're expecting, whether that's good or not, is that the U.S. being invaded by a large military like Russia or China would have a larger effect than the gas price. Okay. Other ones are, which one would have a longer lasting effect? U.S. economy crashing, sea level rising. We're looking for sea level rising. And now we're getting into questions that are like, okay, use whatever metrics you want to justify which of these is more significant. So one is major new disease causing global pandemic. The other one is major economic crisis, causing a global recession. Now you can use, scope, severity, time frame, probability, whatever you want. This is also secretly a test to see whether you know some like, I don't want to say like higher level impact comparison, but stuff like root cause analysis. In other words, saying, hey, a new pandemic would cause a recession, so that is why the global pandemic is more significant. And that is the answer that we're looking for there. Briefly describe a plausible reason why a major earthquake hitting San Francisco could be significantly harmful. This is basically like write the impact. I don't love the phrasing of this question right now. Would love some feedback on it. But what I'm hoping for here is like measuring whether people are quantifying and qualifying that impact. Like, here's how many people live in San Francisco. Here is the kind of effect that that an earthquake would have. Now, the difficulty here is if I tell you to do that, I don't measure whether you know to do that or whether you would do that in that scenario. And finally, briefly describe a plausible reason why the cost of housing decreasing will be more significantly beneficial, would be significantly beneficial. This is basically the same thing. And it's just so that, they don't get to, we have two questions accomplishing the same thing. How do we evaluate this? Well, there's the answer that we're looking for. If you give the answer we're looking for, you get 2 points. Then you get 4 points if you provide a explanation, and you get another 4 points if that explanation is compelling. So it's out of 10 points, and let's say you chose one that I didn't intend for you to choose. I still think it's right, but you didn't pick it, but you explain, and that explanation is logically sound. Maybe it's missing a piece of information, right? So maybe there's some piece of information that you are missing about the implication of a military invasion that makes your answer incorrect, but based on the information you had, you've explained it well. I would give that an 8 out of 10, right? And there's other scenarios, right, where you picked the right thing, but you gave a bad explanation. That would give you a 6 out of 10, right? So that is how that section works. The next section is research, and this one I'm pretty proud of. I've been doing this as a part of my curriculum for the last couple of years, and it works really well. You'd be surprised how difficult it is for beginning high school students in debate, especially with some of the demographics that we work with, to answer some of these questions. First, we start with some basic can you Google questions, right? When is Ja Rule's birthday? It's February 29th. He recently had his 12th birthday. Happy birthday, Ja Rule. What was the population of Argentina in 1980? That's just okay, you have to put the whole context of the question in, right? You can't just look up Argentina population. How many stars are on the Australian flag? That sounds really simple, but kids will get that wrong. Middle schoolers and an online beginner class will get that wrong. Why? Because when you look it up in Google, sometimes it'll tell you, like it'll highlight the bit, and kids are just looking at the top. And it'll highlight the bit that says that the Australian flag depicts the Southern Cross depicted with 5 stars, ... and it's missing the part where it says, and it has this other star, right? And the kids don't, there's a picture of the flag there. If they just count the number of stars, they'll see it's 6. But Google sometimes will highlight the 5. And so that's the test of like, are you just looking at the thing that Google says and not recognizing when that is incorrect? What was the hottest day in New York City history? I actually just added, say the date and not the temperature, because a lot of people said the temperature. I don't know if I like this question. So far, it's my least favorite question, but I'm leaving it here just so we have some stuff. Now the research questions get a little bit more interesting. What are these flags? I have this one. I mean, people can reverse image search, and if they do, that's great. You know how to do that. That shows some research competency. I don't know that in some of the ways that we're going to present these questions might be asked verbally or being shown to a kid, and they have to like look it up and answer verbally, right? So they might not be able to reverse image search. The purpose behind these questions is, can you answer a question that requires you to generate all of the words on your own, right? So you don't just get to use the language in the question and put that into a search engine. You have to decide how to phrase the question you have. And this was the best idea I had for how to do that. So I've had students in the years I've been doing this look up like what diagonal flag, or like flag with blue, yellow, red, white, and green. Or just describe it in some way, right? The top one is Seychelles. The bottom one is Burkina Faso. And these are flags that if you, or just list of country flags and like scroll through them, right? So are you able to apply some level of creative thinking to how you find something when that's not made obviously clear to you by the prompt? Here are some other ones, and now we get into like tricky territory. What was the third movie Tom Cruise acted in? That was The Outsiders. If you look up this question, and this is the first question that I give in like the research questions to kids, where a lot of kids will get this wrong. Why? Because they look up Tom Cruise third movie and Google says Mission Impossible 3. Like, who looks up Tom Cruise's third movie? It just knows you're looking up Tom Cruise movie 3. And so it's like Mission Impossible 3. Or, hey, there's a third Top Gun being made, right? And it's up to the kids to recognize, oh, that's not correct. Like, that's not the answer I'm looking for. And then be able to figure out, okay, I should find a list of Tom Cruise movies and see what's third. What U.S. state has the third highest population? The idea there is the same, right? That Google doesn't necessarily just give you the answer. You have to look at a list of U.S. states and look at what's third. That's not that complicated. Here's another one. This one requires you to read carefully. People will get this wrong. What is the third biggest city in California? And I've made this clearer. By biggest, I mean area. And by that, I've said more clearly. By area, I mean land size. So if you get this one wrong, that is fully on you. What happens if you look this up on Google, a lot of the time, Google results are different based on how you exactly phrase it, or your cookies or something, your location. It'll tell you the answer is San Jose. The answer is not San Jose. The answer is a little-known place called California City. It was a real estate scam in the 50s, and it's just a massive, empty city in the desert. Here's another one. What U.S. state has the most N's in its name? Shockingly difficult to answer off the top of your head, and also shockingly difficult to Google. Google doesn't understand that you're trying to ask that question. It will be like, here's all the states that have N in the beginning of their name. Is that what you want? And you have to understand, I should look up a list of states and count the N's. Or if you're really clever, find the letter N, and you'll see that the answer is Pennsylvania. This one was one that I was proud of, but I don't think the execution on it is perfect, because sometimes Google just tells you, but who is the song Killing Me Softly with a song about? Something that requires you to find not just like a place to look, but that place isn't a list, like, list of California cities by land area. You have to probably read an article, skim through it, and be like, oh, the song's about Don McLean. He sang American Pie. The person who wrote the song went to a concert of his. It's a good story. Okay. Going to the end of this, there's a question that says, summarize this article. It's a pretty short article on AI. Like, we're looking for like reading comprehension stuff here. And then there is this article that says, find the quote that supports this claim. I like this question a lot. It's basically, the way I made this question is I looked through some back files that I had written, picked the topic, picked the card, took the tag, changed some of the words in the tag so that it's a little harder to just Control F. And then this is not even the whole article. This is a real article that I used for a debate argument. And I think debaters are really intimidated by research papers and have a really difficult time navigating it. And so this question is, can you find a sentence that supports this claim in here? And it shouldn't be that hard to find. Everyone who's taken the test so far has done it, but I'm not convinced that a student with zero, experience in debate, or really something of that like level of academic difficulty, is able to do that. So let's talk about the critical thinking questions. These were fun. These came from, I'm reading a book right now. There's this MIT book series. I'm reading one called Understanding Beliefs, and that one references a book called Slow and Fast Thinking. And the thesis of this book, and it's really long, I skimmed through it, is that basically your brain has two different systems for thinking. There's system one that is very fast and just goes through different neural pathways, and there's system two. And it has a bunch of questions in there. Some of these questions I wrote, some of these questions are from that book that people will get wrong if they're not thinking carefully, if they're not engaging in system two thinking. So the first one isn't from that book. Grace has 5 apples. She ate 3 apples yesterday. How many apples does Grace have? That is a common question that AI get asked to test whether they're able to, engage in some level of logic. Now, I can understand why AI might presume that by Grace has 5 apples, you just mean at the start of this scenario, Grace has 5 apples, and that was longer ago than yesterday. But no human I've had take this test got it wrong. That Grace has 5 apples. How many apples does she have? She has 5. This next one is from the book. All roses are flowers. Some flowers fade quickly. Therefore, some roses fade quickly. Is that valid? The answer is no. Roses are flowers, and we know some flowers fade quickly, but it could be that daisies fade quickly and no roses do, and therefore some flowers will fade quickly, but no roses will, right? The next one is one of mine, but it's based on a common philosophical framing. There are no black swans. A bird on the lake is black. Therefore, it's not a swan. That is valid. Now, famously, the premises are not true. There are black swans. But if we take the first 2 premises to be true, the conclusion must follow, right? That if the bird on the lake is a bird and it is black, it cannot be a swan. if there are no black swans. The next one is not from the book. That one's also me. It's something I talk about a lot on this channel. It is the most common logical mistake debaters make. It's called denying the antecedent. If Noah forgets to set an alarm for the morning, he will be late for school. Noah did not forget to set an alarm, therefore he won't be late. That is not valid. There's a million other ways that Noah can be late for school, and us knowing that one of those potential causes didn't happen doesn't mean that we don't know that the other causes will. These next ones involve a little bit more math in some of them. It's not like hard math, but it is like mathematical brain thinking. This is from the book. A bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does a ball cost? If you're doing the fast thinking, your brain goes, it costs 10 cents. The bat costs $1. That is not true. It costs 5 cents. The bat costs $1.05. Together they make what am I saying right now? They make $1.10. Okay. Which of these is more likely to happen? This is also from the book. This one was fascinating. This is really cool. What's more likely? A massive flood somewhere in the United States next year in which more than 1,000 people drown, or an earthquake in California sometime next year causing a flood in which more than 1,000 people drown. A ton of people, I'd say most, will say the second one is more likely. Although mathematically, the first one includes the second scenario. So if there's any possibility of any flood in any other scenario, which there is, one must be more probable. But your brain goes, well, California has earthquakes, so that's pretty likely, which is just fascinating. The last one is also from the book. I don't love this one, but I still think it's useful. I don't care for math. But yes, 5 machines take 5 minutes to make 5 widgets. How long would it take for 100 machines to make 100 widgets? Your brain wants to keep the pattern. It was 5, 5, 5, so it must be 100, 100, 100. But if you're thinking carefully, you realize that the 5s are a coincidence. It takes one machine 5 minutes to make one widget. And so it would take 100 machines 5 minutes to make 100 widgets. This is a critical thinking stuff, and we're hoping that we can measure some sort of positive impact on that. Okay, this next bit is listening. So Paul and I recorded a very slow, very lay and beginner-friendly debate, and he's going to use it to teach his classes. We might put it on the channel. I don't think it's a perfect video, but I took some clips from it, and the first bit is you just watch one of us give a speech. I don't remember who, and you just summarize those points. I think it's Paul. So there's some multiple choice questions here about the stuff that is in Paul's speech. And you can listen to it multiple times, but it's just like, is this going over your head? This is something we might have to adjust. If it's way too easy, we need to probably make it a little bit harder. I'll talk a little bit about how we make those adjustments later. More multiple choice questions about that. Here is an interesting one. I think what would you tell this speaker to improve this speech question is good, and it's intentionally vague, and you can base, from their answer, like, okay, is that good advice? Is that bad advice? One thing that I want to test for here that is hard to do without spoiling it is Paul's sources in this speech are all, I kind of like, it's kind of this multiple choice question is getting to that. I guess I just made it the multiple choice question and it's fine. I think I already fixed that problem. But yes, can you identify that, Paul using all sources that are like nuclear power providers of America is probably a biased choice. And then there's other stuff, but maybe a lot of the feedback we get is on delivery stuff, and maybe that's useful, maybe it's not, I don't know. Then there's like, okay, you just did multiple choice, a little bit of scaffolding here. Now I want you to do like short answer on these, and so here is now my response can you like understand that stuff? Like, what are the main points I'm making? What is the evidence I'm using? But also, like, here is Paul responding to that. What did he respond to? What didn't he respond to? A lot of this is like in that listening stuff that we talked about, but also being able to identify a warrant, identify impacts, stuff like that. This is included. I don't expect a lot of people to do it in the evaluation, but this is the how we test for delivery stuff. So this is half written by me, half written by Joey, half written by ChatGPT, and it's a piece of text that you're supposed to read, and the key here is that it should be really explicitly clear what you should be doing with your tone and your like delivery while you're reading it. So the only way to do that while kind of controlling for, you know, creative choices is to have the piece be about verbal delivery. And can you modulate your voice in the ways that this text is describing? It's more of a like mechanical, are you able to execute these things? You have the like control of your delivery sufficiently. And then Joey also wanted to test a tongue twister. I think his philosophy on it was like, let's see if maybe we help with this. Through 3 cheese trees, 3 free fleas flew. I could probably look through that a couple times and do it, but I don't know. So then we have what's not included right now, but we would probably do in person. Like a spar, we have like a million spar topics. I just picked a few for this video, and you know, get a little bit of time and without research, like, can you just make an argument? And this is where we would generate your own application or evaluate your own application of structure, of your word economy, of your vocabulary, of the soundness of your logic, stuff like that. And then there's another listening idea we have. We haven't recorded it because it's really tricky, but we have this idea for having a debate that isn't a formal debate. Like, I don't even just mean like technical and it has jargon. I mean, it's just two people arguing. They're not taking turns. They're not like, the subject of the debate isn't explicitly like written ahead of time. And this will be something that we write and we record ourselves so that, you know, it's usable. But we want to ask questions like, what is this argument about? Like, what is the thing that they disagree on? What are the things that they agree on? Like, why do they believe this thing? How are they supporting these ideas? And I think that is really valuable stuff for people to be getting a training and doing. Okay. If you're skipping to just this part, congratulations, because that was a long bit. But yeah, just a little bonus. I gave all of these questions to ChatGPT, and I think it's interesting what parts it did well with. For the research, it got some of them right, it got some of them wrong. So some of the basics: Ja Rule, Australia, Argentina, the flags, hottest day in New York City, got all those right. Tom Cruise, it got wrong. And the reason it got it wrong is because those movies came out in the same year. Losing It and The Outsiders came out in the same year, and ChatGPT just assumed that one came first. It didn't like actually look at a chronological filmography. State with the third highest population, it got right though. It got the California city question wrong. I don't know why. The question's as specific as can be. It got Pennsylvania correct. Killing Me Softly, didn't really understand the question. I was like, well, the song is about a singer, so that's who she's singing about. But like, right, but who is the singer? Here is the summary stuff. So this top bit, that's the summarizing the argument, or the summarizing the article. I think it did a pretty good job of that. And then it was like, where in this article is there a sentence that supports this thesis? I love how it did that. It just like highlighted, bolded it exactly like we do with a card. Did a great job there. The impact stuff, I think it did great in. There wasn't a single answer here where I would say that was unsatisfactory. The logic stuff, it did really, really bad in. It only got the mathy ones correct. If Grace has 2 apples, got that one absolutely. If she has 5, blah, 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 got that one wrong. It said that the roses fade quickly, whatever, was valid. It's not. On the Black Swans one, it doesn't understand that even though the instructions say, like, you assume the premise is true. So it's like, okay, but there are no black swans. So, there are black swans. So the conclusion isn't valid. But it says, like, the color of the bird does not determine its species. Well, in this scenario, it would determine one species that it is not. And the last one, the denying the antecedent, it gets it wrong. It says Noah won't be late because he woke up on time, but there could be traffic. He could break his leg. The bat and the ball, it got correct, very mathy. The earthquake one, it got wrong for the exact reason that people get it wrong. An earthquake in California causing a flood is more likely to happen. Earthquakes in California are relatively common. So that's really interesting. The widgets and the machine, whatever, got that right. Okay, now let's talk about, we're almost done. This wasn't that long a video. Once that other section took so long, I thought it was going to take forever. But this is kind of where we're at. Right now, what I need is just as much data as I can get. So let me talk about some of these things. I talked about, well, first we have to figure out what we're trying to measure for, what our goals are, what we think debate should do, and what my curriculum is seeking to accomplish. So then we have to come up with, okay, how do we measure if we're doing that? The first phase after that was testing for false negatives. In other words, this is supposed to be a basic assessment. And I gave it to people who I knew without a doubt should 100% pass. Like, you are a good enough debater that any basic skill assessment should pass you with flying colors, and if it doesn't, there's something wrong with the questions. So I did that. I gave it to the folks at the BDL, I gave it to Paul, I gave it to Tanya, and some of the questions were confusingly phrased. Hopefully I've adjusted for most of those, but the way I'm trying to still measure for that with the large data is with the, like, how many years of experience you have with debate. Once the number is high enough and somebody doesn't pass everything, like, that should be a red flag. And I'll look into that and see if I need to make adjustments for clarity. The next thing is I need to test for false negatives. It's not a useful evaluation if everyone passes, especially since we want to be able to, like, track progress over, like, okay, how much, if we're running a camp, what kind of impact does 2 weeks of camp have on this stuff? Is it noticeable? Is it significant? What does a year of doing debate at your school do? And if everyone is doing a good job, then that doesn't leave a lot of room for measuring progress. So I'm trying to strike a balance between, like, yes, you've reached a point where you are competent, and beyond that, like, I'm not telling you how you should do debate. The debate styles change all the time, and debate strategy changes, and I'm not trying to have a prescriptivist description of, like, the ideal debater. But just like I wouldn't have that of, like, the ideal basketball player, right? But I think there's certain things, like, we agree that, like, a basketball player should be able to, like, I don't know, run and dribble. And pass. Okay. Yeah, so based on that, I'm going to hopefully be, the goal is to have a working version of this that we can use at our camp this summer. And then who knows when the actual data will add up to something useful. But the cool thing that I really appreciate about this job is that it doesn't have to be immediate. We just get to make things that we think are valuable, and we're not like, so much of the debate community is just teachers doing unpaid labor on a voluntary basis, and that's just not sustainable. And it's been really hard for like people who complain about like debate topics. Like, no one's job is to write a debate topic. So it's wild that it gets done at all. And I think, the quality of our debate topics could improve, but I also understand like the barriers in the way. And anyway, I appreciate that. I get to do stuff like this. Is that it? That's it, folks. But I always say, like, say stuff in the comments, like, but genuinely, I would. That's why this whole video exists. I would like, in fact, maybe I'll call the video, I would like your feedback on our skill evaluation assessment or something like that. Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.